Okay, amazing. Thank you everyone for being here and welcome to our talk. Today we're going to talk about how to implement complex UI in Flutter. Before we get started, let us introduce ourselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Océane GILLARD. I live in Nantes, France, and I'm a Flutter developer at Zenika. In my free time, I created a mobile app which is named Score Barbu. The goal of this app is in Flutter, and the goal of this app is to be able to fill scores during a card game, which is a Barbu or Tafron.
And my name is Leah. I'm based in Dublin, in Ireland, and I'm a mobile developer at Yelp. During my free time, I developed a solution called Steezy. It's for handball statistics live during games. And our app is in Flutter as well. To start, I want to talk about why we're here today to talk about complex UI. So the first reason is in our work, we work with designers a lot, and it's very important to us to be able to have the tools to implement the designs that designers come with, and to be able to implement every quirk and detail, no matter how out of the box the idea might be or the implementation might be. The second, so we want tools that enable us to create those designs. And the second thing is we tend to call each other a lot to exchange ideas or get someone else's point of view about complex designs and how would you implement this and so on. And we thought if it interests us to have other people's opinion, like each other's point of view, it might interest other people as well. So we're here today to go through example and share our point of view with you.
So during this talk, we are going to see 4 use cases that we've taken from our application. The first one will be about stacking information and comes from the Barbu app. So to play a game, we need to create players. So for the Barbu app, we created a screen to create player. A player has a name, an avatar, and a color. And so we designed these cards where we wanted to fill the information of each player. What's complex about this design is that we want the avatar to overlap the container, and it doesn't exist by default with Flutter. So we try to see how we can implement that. So Leah, how would you do that?
I'd start by the beginning, creating a container, because that we can see that there's a rectangle here in our design. And then adding a little border radius so we can have a container that matches the design that was given. Adding a little bit of color as well. Now let's add the player name. So we know we want a text field. So inside our container, we can add it as a child. However, I can see that by default, my text field is aligned to the top of the container. So we can fix that by adding an alignment bottom center to the container. So the child aligns to the bottom center. Now let's try to see how we can add our avatar. So the first thing is we have a widget in Flutter that's called stack that enables us to stack things on top of each other. And so we're going to make use of that here because we can clearly see that things are stacked onto each other. I'm making use also of the circle avatar, which is by default in Flutter. So this widget enables us to have the little round avatar with the image inside and the background color. However, we can see that our avatar is not well stacked on our container. So let's try to see how we can fix that. So we can use position widgets to try and tell where each element should be positioned. So my thinking here was saying we can see the avatar is positioned higher than the container. So I was trying to position the avatar at the top of the stack and the container at the bottom of the stack. However, because I didn't constrain my stack, it's taking the full height of my screen, which is not what we want here. So let's constrain this. I hard-coded values for now just to see if my design matches what I had in mind. And it's looking a lot better. So now that I have one avatar, and instead of using hard constraints, like hard-coded constraints, I'm going to Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped. Let me rephrase that. I forgot. I totally forgot about the close icon. So we do have our avatar and we have our text field and we have our container, but we're missing the close icon. So I'm using position again to position that and using an icon button. However, there's two problems I can see here. The first one is the icon is not centered with my button. And the second one is we can clearly see the outline of the container behind the button, and we don't want that. So to fix that, first of all, we can add a background to the icon button, and also by default, an icon button as paddings. And so if we remove this padding and set it to 0, then the icon is centered correctly. So now that what I was saying previously, we have one avatar. Now we know that we're going to have more than one player inside a game. So let's add a grid view to add multiple players. This enables us to, first of all, add multiple players, but also remove the hard-coded height and width constraints that I had set in my first example. So it's looking quite good. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's great. But could you try this on a smaller screen just to check if it's responsive? Whoa. Okay.
Too good.
Yeah, no. Let's see how we can fix that. First, we see that the container is really big on a small screen. So what we can do here is just adapt its size depending on the screen size and the size it can have. So we can use the layout builder for that. So the layout builder is a widget that allows the parent to pass its constraints to its child. And so now we can use it for the container and say that the container has 90% of its parent's height. Width. Sorry, it's a little small on the PC. Width and 60% of height. Now it's better. Let's try on a bigger screen to see how it looks. Well, now I think the avatar is a little small, so we can also use the layout builder to just increase its size depending on the constraints we have. And now it looks great on the big screen. Let's see how it looks on the smaller one.
It's looking great.
Oh, yeah, I think it's great. So we managed to create a page to create players. It's responsive and looks great like we wanted to. So what we learned here is how to stack information, first of all. So we can use the stack widget and position widget just to be able to move things like we want. There is also just a layout builder that can be used to make responsive design and adapt the design, the length, the width, and everything depending on the size we have.
So let's go and look at our second example, slightly different, around gradients mostly. So as part of suivi, we have all this statistics data from teams, and we wanted to enable them to share those stats on social media platforms. So we created this design of this visual to share those stats, like main stats. The challenges here, first of all, is that we want to create one code base that can adapt, one widget that can adapt to multiple formats, because we know publishing on Instagram is not the same format as publishing on Facebook and so on. And the second thing is we have those very specific colors. So just to clarify, we're going to focus on this widget specifically, so where we actually share the stats, not the whole visual. And here there's two things that are important and kind of tricky for us. The first thing is, so throughout the app, we have those two colors, the purple, the pink to represent the team, and the gray to represent the opposing team. And we want to reflect those colors inside the title here in a gradient that shifts in the center of the title. We also want the title to have this kind of like angled shape. And the last thing that we want is to highlight the best value out of the both values extracted. And so here the tricky thing is, so we want to highlight to go from blue to transparent behind the title. And sometimes the highlighted value can be on the left, sometimes it can be on the right. Sometimes we can highlight both values if they're equal, or highlight none if we don't have any values. So those are all the constraints. How would you go about implementing this?
Yeah, first, let's create the first line. So what we can do is use a row widget to just create each text next to each other. What we can do here is just add a little bit of padding. So we can use the main, the space around property to add spacing, the same space before, after, and between each child of our row so that it looks better. Now let's see how we can create this background behind the text. So what we can do here first is wrap our text into a container and give it some decoration. So as Leah explained, the background is a gradient. So it starts with a red color on the center left of our container and ends with a gray color on the center right of the container. So we can just put a gradient, say that to the gradient, and Flutter and the painter of Flutter will just do its magic and create a smooth gradient so that it looks pretty right. So here we've got a background. What we can do is just add a little bit of padding around our text so that the background is not tight to the text size. We'll have more, it will be prettier like that with 6 pixels around each corner. Now let's see how we can create this strange shape that doesn't exist by default with Flutter, because it's by default the container is just a continuous rectangle. So what we can do here is use a clip path widget that has a clipper property. And so in this clipper property, there is a method that is get clip, I think. The slide will move to check. Yeah, that's it, get clip. The get clip method can be used to create the path of our shape. So here we say that we start on the top left corner. We just move a little bit to the right, start tracing a line up to the top right corner. Then we move in an inclined way to join the bottom. We trace the bottom side, and then we close the path just by joining the first point we draw. And it looks pretty great. So we've got this inclined shape. What we can do is just add a little bit of padding again, because with this inclined shape, we've got the text that is cut, and we don't want that. So we can add a little bit more padding on the horizontal axis. And now let's see how it looks if we add a second row, a second line on our screen. So what do you think?
I think we're up to a good start. It's looking good, but the problem that we have here is that the titles are not exactly the same number of characters. And so, well, first of all, the background is not exactly the same size, but also I feel like the shape isn't exactly the same as well. So let's try to see if we can fix that. So by looking at the design, I can see that the title is what takes up most of the space. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap those titles in an expanded widget. So because both of my rows are in the same widget, the same parent widget, and have the same width, the title will then take the same space. Now it's a bit on the edge. Now the data is a bit on the edge. So I'm going to go ahead and add a bit of padding on the sides of the data. And while we're at it, we can have a look on how to add the highlights of the values. The first thing I thought of is we want to highlight either the left or the right value. So let's add a background to the value itself. The problem then is that because we want this kind of smooth gradient with the title, the gradient would stop at the start of the shape of the title and wouldn't go to the edge of the shape. So I did a little trick instead where I actually changed the background color of the whole row and added the background color as a gradient, and we have the gradient goes from blue on the left side, goes to transparent in the center, so that's behind the title, and back to blue on the right side. And that way we have that smooth effect on both sides. Now we want to highlight only some parts of the gradients, right? So I added variables to highlight only the left, only the right, or both if we want. So it's kind of flexible. So let's say if we want to highlight only the left, then highlight left would be set to true. It would the gradient would go to blue, to transparent behind the title as usual. And then instead of going back to blue, if we said highlight right to false, it would just keep transparent. And so we have kind of this smooth effect that can easily be changed from one side to the other, or both if we want to. I think it's looking quite good, right?
Yeah, it's great.
So I think the main takeaways from this example is, first of all, try to work with the space that you have depending on the format that you have. And using widgets such as expanded are a great tool once you understand what is the thing that needs to be highlighted in your design. And then also gradients can be very, very flexible and allow you to do a bunch of different things. Here we went up to 3 colors of gradients, but we can go so much higher and have so many different colors depending on the needs. And the last thing is the clip path, which makes it very useful when you have those odd shapes. The shapes we drew here is quite simple, but we can go a lot more complex if needed. So that gives a lot of flexibility.
So for our next example, we'll see how we can position points around the circle. So for the use case, so in the Barbu application, a Barbu card game can be really long. And so one of the main features of the application is to be able to save a game and resume it when we are ready. So it can be a few weeks, days, or whatever. So we need to resume the game. And when the game is resumed, the player need to be placed in the same order than they were before. We all know that we will forget where we were sat when we started the game. So we decided to create a screen just to remember the player where they should sat. To do that, we created this design with a table represented by a circle, and where the player should be placed in the right order. We should display the name of the player and its avatar, and they should be equally spaced in the circle. So here I created this layout for 4 players, but of course it should work for 3 to 6 players because we don't have the same number of players on each game. So Leah, would you do that?
This one's a tricky one. I don't exactly know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to start by the beginning and we'll see. So first, I'm going to create my table. So the container, I can give it a shape of circles. So we have our table set. I'm going to give it a little padding on the edges so that it has space to breathe. Now I'm going to try and see how I can add my first avatar. So I'm going to bring back the stack because we can clearly see that the avatars are stacked on top of the table. So I think that's the most natural one to use. And I'm going to use the circle avatar again to show my little player. I'm going to try to position it. I'm going to hard code the position right now because I just want to know and see how it looks. So now that I have my avatar placed, I'm going to add its name underneath. And it's looking good for the first one, but I don't want to hard code every position. And I don't know how to go about it. Do you have an idea how we could do this?
Yeah, I made a little bit of research and I saw there is a math algorithm. Don't worry, I will explain everything. But there is a math algorithm to know how to place points around the circle. So for that, what you need to have is the number of points you want to draw.
So for us, it's the number of players, right?
Yeah, that's it. The radius of your circle.
So that's the size of our table.
Yeah, that's it. And now you're done. So if you want to place points around the circle and they need to be equally spaced, that means that you are going to cut your circle in equal slices. So each slice will have the same angle. This angle is called theta and can be calculated from the number of points you have. And then with some trigonometry, you can calculate the coordinates of each point around your circle. So let's see how it looks if we do that on the screen.
It's weird. We're missing a few circles.
Yeah. Well, that's really strange. Could you just draw the axis and highlight also the origin of your of the container, so the 0, 0 coordinates? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so the 0, 0 coordinates are on the top left of the container. I think that's because, yeah, that's the same thing on web and obviously apparently in Flutter also. So for our algorithm, we need the origin of our calculus to be on the center of the circle. So we just need to move this origin, which is on the top left corner, to the center of our circle, and it should adapt correctly. So what we can do here is just add the circle radius to our calcul, and should look great.
It's weird because our points are not exactly on the circle. They're on the edge. Do you know why that is?
Yeah, I think that's the same problem than before, because when you position a widget, we position also its top left corner. So if we want the circle to be on the middle of the circle, we will need to subtract its radius so that it will be better. So let's see how it looks.
It's looking good. Let's try and see with our avatars.
Yeah, let's see how it looks. So what we can do here is just put the clip none behavior to our stack, so that if the widget overflow the stack, they will always be displayed. So for the avatars that are on the edge, they will not be cut, and we will not have just half an avatar. And now let's try to implement our algorithm. So we've got data, we've got a list of players that we generate, we position all our widgets with that. Once again, it's a little bit strange, but I think we just position the top left corner of our widgets. If we just subtract again the radius of our avatars, it should be great. Okay, so this design seems to work. Yeah, it seems to work for 4 players. Could we try and see how it looks with, let's see, 6? Okay, and 3 of them, how it looks? Yeah,
nice.
I think that's pretty good. So yeah, we just created a table with players around it, and everyone is equally spaced. So what we learned here is how to position points around the circle, but I don't think you will have to use that often. But the main thing that we can gain from this example is that when you're trying to do something that's difficult, sometimes maths can help. And during your studies, the teachers always said algorithm and maths, it's really useful for development. Well, sometimes it's really true. It's really true.
So let's go and have a look at our last example. So here we want to create a widget that can be reused at multiple places throughout the app. So here the use case is for web application. So that means that the screen size are going to be very different depending on the user. A computer, tablet, phones, everything can be used on everything. And I want this select to be used at multiple places with multiple different options. So we don't know in advance how many options we're going to have, what the size of the select, the width the select's going to have as well. And so we want to create something that's very flexible. And the idea here is that when we click on an option, this option will get highlighted by the square, the white square that we see. And when we change option, that would be the ideal, is to have a little animation when it goes from one option to the next. So that's the idea. How would you implement it, Océane?
Well, let's try with the beginning first. Let's create just one option. So I think one option can be represented with a text button, with just a column with an icon and a text. If we want to have multiple buttons, And if you want them to be able to be in one line if they can fit, and just to create a second or a third line if they can't, we can use the wrap widget to do that. So it's adaptive, and it's depending on the size it has, the option will probably will move to the second or third, whatever line they have. So I think that's great. Let's be just a little bit crazy and do a little bit of refactoring by cleaning the code and creating the widget, which will be named select option, to represent our text button, so that it will be easier to understand after. So now what we want to do is to be able to know on which button we just clicked. So what we can do here is put our wrap into a stateful widget, add a selected button property, and just update it when we click on a button. So when we click on the first one, we will save the 0 if it's on the second one, etc., etc. So that we can know which button, first of all, which button is selected. Now what we can do is see how we can create our indicator. So this rectangles that will be on top of our buttons. So once again, we're using the stack widget. We are creating a container with white borders. With white borders and a little bit of radius. Now, what is really important if we want to be able to move our indicator and to have it always centered with a button above it, is to fix the option size and to give the same size to our container and to the select options, so that when we try to move it, it will always be well displayed, because if the two values aren't the same, maybe there can be some disalignment in some sets. So here we created this this option size. We position the indicator on the first one with the first option, and let's see how we can move it. So what we can do is create just a method to calculate the position of our option. So because the option size is fixed, we know that if you click on the first option, it will be placed, the indicator will be placed on 0, 0 position. If it's on the second button, it will be on 100 position, the third 0, 200, etc., etc. So we can just create this method to calculate and dynamically adapt the position of the button. Let's see how it looks on the real screen.
That's looking great.
Yeah, I think it's working.
Oh, but it doesn't seem to map to the second row.
Yeah.
Let's see how we can fix that. So let's go back to our calculate position function. So here we can see in the first version that we were only calculating the position on the x-axis, so the column on which the option was placed. Let's try and see how we can calculate the column and the row of where our option is. So first of all, we get the index of the button that we just selected. We need to know the number of options that can fit in one row. This needs to be calculated every time because it very much depends on what the widget has in width. So in this example, I took the liberty of saying that the widget had the full width of the screen. It could be the parent size, like we've seen previously. So we calculate how many options we can fit in one row. Once we have that, we are able to calculate the row that the option that we just selected is on. So once we have the row, we need to calculate the column. And then once we have the row and the column, since we have a fixed option size, we're able to calculate where we need to position our rectangle. So once we have that, it's looking pretty good. It seems to be going to the second row. And the good thing here is that since nothing is hard-coded, if we have our example with 2 rows, but let's say if we had 4 rows, it should work the same way. The last thing that I see we're missing here is our little animation, right? The good thing is with Flutter, there's a lot of built-in animated widgets. We used a position widget to position our rectangle, our select, and highlight the option selected. So instead of using a position, we can use an animated position widget. And this enables us to then set a duration of the animation and a curve. And by default, we have our little animation working, which is great. I think it's looking quite good and very flexible for all the different users we might have of it. So to conclude, I think the 2 main takeaways here is that, first of all, there's a lot of widgets that come out of the box in Flutter that enables us to have dynamic, dynamic responsive layouts, such as the wrap widgets. And the second thing is there's a lot also of animated widgets that come out of the box that enable us to do some pretty cool stuff very easily. So definitely be on the lookout for those. And again, math to the rescue. With a easy math calculation, we can calculate the position of our options. So
during this talk, we saw 4 use cases. First, we saw how to stack information with the create player screen. We saw how to create dynamic gradients, positioning points around circles, and also creating responsive animated widgets. So those 4 examples were taken from our application, and they were examples that we really tackled on when we tried to do them. Of course, we could have discussed multiple other things, but we don't have time to do this tonight. But yeah, so I don't know what I'm saying. Sorry. So yeah, almost anything can be implementing. Yeah, if you just need to come back from this talk with one idea that almost anything can be implemented. It's really important when you create something to understand why you are creating this. So at the beginning of the talk, we said that we really want to work together with the designer to speak with them, to understand why they want the screen to look like this. And even if it's sometimes really hard to do this, we will just be able to adapt how we do that, sometimes make some compromise. But anything is possible if you just look a little bit and dig and make some research, ask your colleagues, your friends, the community, whatever. There is always something that can have another point of view and can help you with. For a little example, Leah presented the animated position at the end of the talk. I tried to do this and didn't work. I didn't manage, but it didn't work because I didn't fix the option size. And so when I tried to move my widgets, well, it was always there were a few pixels, but still a few pixels, and it wasn't great. So yeah, just by talking to each other and trying to share with you, with us, with everyone, it can help. So thank you for listening to our talk. These are our contacts and the QR codes to our apps if you want to see that. And if you've got some questions, just feel free. We will be happy to answer you.